And now it's time for another edition of What Would Jello Do? Gotta sit down for this one. Okay, I admit it, even though I could not bring myself to vote for Barack Obama because of how disappointed I have been, even though I didn't expect that much from a mainstream Democrat, I have to admit I'm pretty damn relieved that Romney and Ryan and everything they stood for lost. And I can't help but feel warm inside and cackle at reports of things like Romney in shell shock. He was so cocksure he was going to win, he supposedly hadn't even prepared a concession speech, let alone woke up to 60 million middle fingers aimed in his direction instead of being president. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So I guess we'll never know if the first Mormon president was actually fronting for a different cult. 2008, he said, in that campaign, he said his favorite book was Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard, and I always thought somebody should have dug into that one a little more. And I guess we will never find out how badly the world will catch fire if John Bolton was Secretary of State. Nightmare postponed. And yes, I admit I've been glued to the boob tube for days when I'm supposed to be finishing our White People and the Damage Done album, watching the Fox pundits go apoplectic batshit. I switched to them immediately when the election was called for Obama, and the bottle blonde ice queen on there was saying, well, it looks like Mitt Romney's dreams of the presidency have been foreclosed. Boy, was that interesting language, especially from Fox, and all the finger pointing, all the blame. Romney was too wimpy. No, the Tea Party wrecked everything and deprived them of their Senate majority for a second election in a row. Karl Rove raked over his own coals, pissing away $300 million of other people's money. And then on top of that, suddenly the CIA director, David Petraeus, who was, some kind of manufactured war hero with a halo over his head and 4 stars across his forehead that both parties were coveting to run for president in 2016, he has to resign because his penis got him in trouble with a woman named, of all things, Paula Broadwell, author of his biography, All In. I mean, how do you make up these names and stuff? Ian Fleming died when I was 6 years old. Paula Broadwell, Pussy Galore, Plenty O'Toole, all in, baby. I love a man in uniform. This is even better than the UPS man ad yesterday. And it happens the same day as the opening of a new James Bond movie. And then there's footage of Broadwell dressed to the nines like a Bond babe on Jon Stewart's show, like she was about to run off and have shaken not stirred martinis with guess who. And then just in time, another general in trouble with another babe who has already hired Monica Lewinsky's lawyer. And so here we go, finding out our main national security threat turns out not to be Al-Qaeda or Netanyahu or the Taliban, but bored, rich, southern debutante bitches. And everybody involved is already married. We even got what could be our last glimpse of Obama as that cool, hip dude we hoped we were getting in 2008 before he goes back to cutting deals with the devil. But gloat at your peril, my fellow earthlings. Remember 2010? If the hope and change agenda gets disrespected and compromised and people who voted hope don't show up again, 2014 will make 2010 look like a day at the beach on the Jersey Shore. Paul Ryan may be the perfect little cartoon vampire to put on a cereal box with purple skin and everything, but he and that sick agenda of his are far from gone. Same for Sarah Palin, same for Chris Christie, and as I've said before, beware of Jeb Bush. And no mainstream punditoids seem to want to admit that this whole vote was not pro-Obama, it was anti-Romney. It was anti-Ryan. It was anti-Tea Party, anti-Wall Street. It was motivated not by hope, but by fear. Especially the women, once they got a whiff of what Ryan and Santorum and Todd Aiken really had in mind for them. At times it seemed like Obama and his handlers were trying to lose the election as usual, like so many wimpocrats have in the past, like Al Gore and John Kerry, deliberately avoiding such obvious trump cards as Romney being a third term for Bush, if not worse. The 47% video fades into the rearview mirror, and seemingly bowing to Bill Clinton and Cory Booker when they came right out and said not to attack Bain Capital for plundering all those businesses and wrecking thousands of people's lives, because Bain aren't so bad, they're not monsters, they do a lot of good. And away went the Mitt Romney's not the solution, he's the problem ads, right when they were working and being so effective. Weird. And again, even in the victory speech, Obama is very chintzy and cheap with those cult tales. No plugs for other offices, no call with all that energy in the room for people to get involved in their own communities and keep the momentum going and actually work for real change, run for city council, mayor, state legislature. He didn't just not thank Bill Clinton, he didn't thank the people who were involved. Maybe because the corporate crats really don't want us involved, except one day in November. Exhibit A, Wisconsin, back when 100,000 people had stormed the Capitol, they were occupying the Capitol building. Joe Biden wanted to go down. Of all people, Joe Biden, one of the godfathers of the drug war, not my favorite person, but in this case, he wanted to go down and show some solidarity, and his boss said no. And then when the election to recall that horrific Governor Walker was going down, Obama is in the neighboring state of Minnesota campaigning, and he couldn't even show up to plug his own party to get rid of one of the worst governors in the United States. What does that say? No, just like 2008, now they have this huge database of voters from their Get Out a Vote drive, but just like that 2010, watch them not use it. In 2010, they wouldn't even let other people use it, and we need to. Let's not forget Obama barely won the popular vote, and that means since about only half of American adults even show up to vote, and we call that a huge turnout in this country, that means 1 in 4 adults walking around on the street, you can look around as you see them, 1 in 4 actually got off their ass to make the effort to vote for Mitt Romney. Which ones were they? Significant chunk of that 47% the Ebenezer Scroogicans and Romney dismissed as deadbeats actually voted for him. And 40% of the union voters, the very unions are trying to wipe out, theoretically voted for Ryan as well as Romney. And some of these other demographics are interesting too. Obama, 50% to 48% for the Catholic vote, which means the bishops don't have as much power as they would like. 73% of Asians went for Obama, torpedoing the stereotype of the fussy conservative Asian voter, which 20 years ago was 60% Republican. 69%, over 2-to-1 of the Jewish vote went to Obama instead of Romney, and with that kind of Jewish support, surely Bibi Netanyahu, who isn't even supported by everybody in Israel, should not have veto power over our foreign policy any more than somebody like Eric Cantor or Paul Ryan should have veto power over our domestic policy. After all the rape comments and the anti-contraception stuff in a country that is overwhelmingly pro-choice, only 54% of women voted for Obama, even though, as some people put it, Romney is the ultimate vision of their ex-husband. The rape guys at least lost for the Senate at Indiana and Missouri, but 1 in 3 women voted for Todd Akin. Again, which ones were they? What on earth were they thinking? We now have 20 women in the Senate, the most ever, although the new one from Nebraska is a clear off the scale Tea Party wingnut, and another one is Dianne Feinstein. But enough people came out that there's some way cool news on the ballot initiative front, which is, again, the local elections are one of the main reasons to show up and vote, in my opinion. After losing over 30 times in a row, marriage equality, which some people call gay marriage, I think marriage equality is a better term, passed. Maryland, Maine, Washington, 3 states, and an attempt by Michelle Bachmann and company to ban it in Minnesota also got voted down. And then we get to weed. full decriminalization of marijuana passed, finally, in Colorado and the state of Washington, but not in Oregon? One of the most pothead-infested places I've ever been in my life, and they voted down? What were they smoking this time? But this means that all governors now have some leeway to commute small-time, non-violent drug sentences, especially pot, for time served, let them out of the prisons and save a ton of money in the process. And in Colorado and in Washington, they're already dismissing marijuana charges, even though a federal law says they have to prosecute. Or that it's illegal. They don't actually have to prosecute it and enforce the law. Watch out for the Wild West, though, folks. I've seen the backlash in Colorado when people get too spoiled, and then there's an equal reaction. It happened in Alaska when they decriminalized, and then a really bad drug law instead got voted in 2 years later. But to keep the decriminalization ball rolling, don't forget we may have allies in unlikely places, finding common ground with, of all people, libertarians and even the Tea Party. It does creep me out that half the Republicans under 30 who voted in the primaries voted for Ron Paul, whose racial views and views on abortion and religion I find as scary or scarier than Sarah Palin or Paul Ryan. But one of the reasons all those people voted for Ron Paul was because his stand on decriminalizing drugs. I mean, what is it with these people? Do they put on some Grateful Dead or some Fish and light up a joint and then trip out to their black light posters of Ayn Rand? I don't get it. But we have allies here. But ha-ha, libertarians, another really good sign that people are finally waking up. Voters in California actually passed an initiative to raise taxes. Tired of their schools being gutted and the roads never getting fixed, perhaps. This is huge because it also led to a supermajority, so-called, taking over in the California state legislature, where now they may even be able to repeal that horrific Proposition 13 that, lowered some property taxes but gutted the school system and had a poison pill in there that said you can't raise a tax even at the city level without a 2/3 majority, and now they have a 2/3 majority. And Jerry Brown says he doesn't want any taxes raised without approval of the voters, but we're talking about getting an initiative on saying 55% instead of 2/3. And some of these, surely you can raise things like oil extraction fees, a little bit of an auto license fee at the time when the state is broke. And another thing that corporate media ain't about to go into and tell you is Obama on down really need to thank the Occupy movement for saving their ass. It wasn't just Bill Clinton. It was the spirit of Occupy and the ripple effect that got those ballot initiatives passed, got people to vote smarter. In Michigan, that horrible law allowing the governor to appoint an emergency financial manager who becomes a dictator of a city and gets to privatize anything he wants and fire everybody, that law has been overturned. And let's not forget who made inequality in this country the main issue of the election. It wasn't the Barack star. It wasn't Jim Messina, his campaign manager, David Plouffe or David Axelrod or anybody else. It was Occupy and all the people sympathizing with Occupy. But Romney was supposed to win. Where did all these voters come from? A lot of the people who weren't supposed to show up, they weren't middle class, they were poor. P-O-O-R, poor, remember them? We always talk about protecting the middle class, but what about the people who've already fallen out of there? The very millions corporate media goes to great lengths to deny exist, unless, of course, it's a reality show making fun of them. They tried everything, all kinds of newfangled post-Bush vote fraud, all in the name of combating vote fraud. Really long lines to the point where in Ohio the United Nations sent election observers like they would normally do in Indonesia or Venezuela or something like that. They didn't trust us either. Ohio and Arizona government authorities even sent notices out to selected people whose skin might not be white that the election was actually Thursday and not Tuesday, and they still haven't finished counting the votes in Arizona, where Joe Arpaio is the sheriff in Maricopa County. Obama said, looking a little testy for once, we have to fix this. Okay, now let's see you actually fix this. And also investigate the earlier voter fraud that allowed Bush to steal the 2000 and 2004 elections and his brother Jeb to steal the governorship from Janet Reno in 2002. Yeah, otherwise we're going to get more lines, more ID laws, and the Supreme Court is going to jump in just like Citizen United, saying they're going to look at a little part of the Voting Rights Act. Watch them use that as an excuse to gut the whole thing. But people say, oh, Brockstar better not go too far. You people hoping for change, you better forget that because there's not really a mandate. Oh, yes, there is. Popular vote was narrow, but think of all the people, the unemployed, the angry, the people so heartbroken they didn't even vote at all. They're on our side. There's your mandate. So instead they're saying no mandate. Now we all have to get back with the program of austerity because we're about to go over a fiscal cliff. What is the fiscal cliff? People are already backing down and saying maybe it's a little slow curve, but it's really just the privateers, reading pirates, and extortionauts trying to seize back the debate so they can steal more money before people get too many ideas and their scams start becoming unraveled. No, the mandate is clear as day on this. No more austerity, no grand bargains with the devil at the expense of the people. We don't owe them. They owe us, don't they? Grand theft austerity has failed everywhere it's been tried. Greece, the economy gets worse. Spain, worse. Portugal, worse. Ireland, worse. Britain, so bad that now Save the Children, who normally runs those tug at the heartstring ads for ghettos in third world countries, they're now having to do the same work in England. And let's not forget they've had riots there already. And the Red Cross is now trying to feed people in Spain. And it doesn't have to be this way. No matter what our corporate media and puppet leaders keep telling us, no, it does not have to be this way. And again, totally blacked out in the corporate media. But not only would we get back over $1 trillion just by saying no to the book's tax cuts for millionaires, they're not talking about one of the easiest ways to do this, that nobody's going to feel that much pain. 1% or even 0.5% tax on stock transactions. Trillions of dollars get exchanged every year. Just a tiny little tax that the Mitt Romneys and the Warren Buffetts and the Goldman Sachs aren't even going to feel would wipe out the deficit in 2 or 3 years, according to Ralph Nader. Another tax on shipping money out of the country to places like Mitt's Cayman Islands accounts and Swiss accounts and things like that. A little tax on that, and we have balanced the budget without even having to really chew on anybody that hard. Fox News, of all people, put it the best. Tax the rich one. Why should President Obama compromise? Right there on the screen. As we stare into the depths of another Great Depression, why listen to anybody whose solution is to bring back the Great Depression? Let's not forget that before Reagan got in, the rich never paid less than a 70% tax rate. Eisenhower was high as 93%, and what do you know? Growth higher, things got done, we went to the moon, people were happier. Clinton raised taxes on the rich, the economy thrives, no more deficit, we had a surplus. Bush lowers it, the economy tanks. The 1% are so scared of a tiny little transaction tax, the news media blacked it out when Occupy went to the Treasury building to raise the transaction issue with Occupy the Treasury. Europe, as usual, is ahead of this, and there's been a lot of talk of bringing in a transaction tax, either country by country or in the European Union. When the EU meets to consider it, who is dispatched over there by the Brockstar to threaten everybody into backing down but that lovely Treasury Secretary, Timothy Geithner. Well, they may do it anyway, especially now that Sarkozy got kicked out in France because of austerity, and Merkel may go down next year in Germany. And let's not forget, up until the mid-60s, there was a tax on stock transactions in this country until it was voted out at a time when there was a Democratic president and the Democrats had both the House and the Senate. It was the Democrats that got rid of it. According to the New York Times, Obama deep down is worried about his legacy. He wants to be one of the greatest presidents. Bring people together. Look how well that's worked. Austerity will not bring people together unless they're all huddling for warmth because the shelters are too full, or if they're all rioting because the safety net has been shredded as bad as it has been in places like Greece. Further divide people by class? That's not going to bring anybody together. Look at the legacy you've got so far. It's as empty as Clinton. No. Lift more boats. Oh, don't worry, they say. Now that he doesn't have to worry about re-election, Obama's going to be way cooler in his second term. That's not what happened with Bill Clinton. The opposite happened with Bill Clinton. Suddenly, Obama doesn't have to worry about the lower middle class, the poor, the unemployed, or what environmentalists think of him. He doesn't have to worry about being abandoned because he approves the Keystone XL pipeline next year. We still got to work to prevent that. And don't forget, at the convention, he promised 600,000 new jobs in the natural gas industry. Again, a signal he's totally down with unregulated cowboy fracking, no matter how many millions of people it poisons. And let's not forget that vampire that keeps rising out of its coffin because it's so desperate to drink our blood, known as the Simpson-Bowles Commission. Their recommendations were all about the deficit and who to hurt, were almost as cruel as Paul Ryan. No raising of taxes on rich people. And that's going to come up again, especially if Obama goes through with the threat to replace Geithner as Treasury Secretary with none other than Erskine Bowles. So sure, billionaire oligarchs lost one election battle, but as long as this stuff, Erskine Bowles, grand bargains goes on, they are winning the war. How dare that 47% think they should get entitlements like food, health care, housing, meaningful job. Entitlements? Don't fall for that. Those are basic human rights. Other countries have them by law. It seems to me they're the ones who think we should be giving them all of these entitlements to all of our money they can eat without ever paying a dime in taxes. That we should all work for longer hours, for less pay, and the whole world is going over a cliff unless we all work ever harder just to pay the rich to be rich because they're so entitled. This is no grand bargain. This is a kleptocracy. This is a coup. Entitlements. What about common community obligations? Remember community? That concept? Exxon has been running these pseudo South Park cartoon ads of, we need better teachers. Let's solve this. Okay, fine. Exxon is notorious for paying little to no taxes every year. Why don't they cough up the money to hire the teachers instead of spending millions of dollars in ads about it? Let's admit their role in wrecking the schools in the first place because, once again, tinkle-down economics does not work. The number one problem facing the world, as I've said before, it ain't even climate collapse, it's global warming. It ain't even climate collapse, it's corruption. That's what prevents the proper action on global warming, on inequality, it's corruption. Oh, the parties are so polarized. The country's so polarized. No, I don't buy that. Number one, the Democrats and the Republicans are not polarized, but actually dancing arm in arm around the same maypole of corporate feudalism and greed, still clueless to the fact that the eagle can't fly on two right wings, not even for them. Okay, part two, because a cell phone that sounded like a fucking car alarm or a fire drill went off because somebody didn't turn it off. It wasn't me. The number one problem facing this country in this world, I've said it before, and people have kind of stopped aghast, but it's not climate collapse, it's not inequality, it's corruption. The corruption that prevents any meaningful steps being taken about things like climate collapse and inequality. Say, oh, the problem is America's so polarized. The parties are so polarized. Not really. No. The parties are all dancing arm in arm around the same pole, the same maypole of corporate feudalism and greed, till clueless to the fact that the eagle can't fly on two right wings, even for them, while the rest of us keep getting shoved further and further down the hill around the other pole, all slogging counterclockwise, pushing one of those medieval wooden wheels to slowly turn the machinery. I still agree with Michael Moore that a lot of the people, even who fall for things like the Tea Party and Rush Limbaugh, are actually on the same page with us with a lot of key issues. They're not so much hateful as frightened. And they've fallen for immigrant bashing, people steering them away from blaming the rich for stealing their money, things like that. But their main issue is the same. They want to survive. They want to have a decent life. They want to be able to put food on the table for their families, and they're sick of being burned, and they're scared they're going to lose their job, their houses, and everything else. They're as sick as we are of deal makers instead of leaders. Which means one thing we could move on that one is, please, can we get rid of Harry Reid as majority leader in the Senate and get somebody more effective? Then they say, oh, well, what this election has proved us that all that money for ads doesn't matter. Well, yes, they do. The election industrial complex has grown exponentially because of that Citizens United ruling. It's not going to shrink. It's going to grow. Because also unreported is the toxic effect huge money has had in tipping local elections, state legislatures. So now there are 30 Republican governors, and practically that many states where the Republicans also, and we're talking Tea Party clowns here, control both houses of the legislature. And then things like Wisconsin and Ohio and Michigan and those crazy laws start happening. That's where the money comes in. And it came in California, where Proposition 37, a perfectly reasonable request to label genetically modified, or should I say genetically mutilated food products as GMOs, as something that has 90% support in this country. In opinion polls, turn around, it was supposed to win, and it lost. It lost huge after the Franken-food industry and big grocers and stuff ran all these ads saying, oh no, it'll be inconvenient. It might raise your taxes. It'll cost you $400 more a year in groceries, with no evidence to back that up. And then 2 initiatives in El Monte, California and Richmond to tax soda pop to pay for the medical costs of all these diabetic, obese kids and adults. Those went down too after the big soda companies poured in ad money to scare everybody, to the point where some people in Richmond were even saying it was racist because African Americans drink a lot of pop. What is going on here? This is the wrath of, what should we call them? Big bubbly? How about big gulp? Meanwhile, 60 other countries, including most of Europe, have not suffered any of these things by demanding that genetically mutilated Franken-food be labeled. So, no more secret money. This is something to work on, and if that vote fails, then shame everybody who voted it down, and maybe you can get rid of them in 2014 and take the House back, too. Voter ID laws are going to spread. The other side is going to work on more get out the vote things, like go back to the Christian Coalition tactic of even running stealth candidates, as they called them from time to time. Well, I think I've said this before too. Franklin Roosevelt, when he first got elected in a huge mandate because of the Great Depression and Prohibition, 1932, labor leader gives him a list of demands, and he says, I like it. I want to do it. Now make me do it. We did not make Barack Star do it during the health care debate. If there'd been 1 million uninsured march on Washington, we'd have a public option now. This time we have to make him do it. Blow torch up the ass. Increase the pressure. No war with Iran. No Keystone XL pipeline. No grand bargains. No Simpson toilet bowls. No more torture, no more Afghanistan. Close Guantanamo Bay, and while you're at it, quit torturing Bradley Manning and let him go. Marijuana, get with the program, you ex-toker and admitted one-time cocaine user, you. And for crying out loud, listen to people like New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and others when they say storms like Sandy aren't the 100 or 200 year flood anymore. They could happen almost every year, and it's time we started getting prepared. So how about a big ass stimulus focused on specific things to prepare and fortify ourselves for climate collapse? A little aside in a Bill Clinton speech to help save Obama's ass in Minnesota sent chills down my spine when Clinton said, Long term, because of climate collapse, we have to start moving away from waterways, relocate our cities away from coastlines and big rivers. Woo! Seawalls alone are not going to accomplish this, and it'll spoil the view. We're going to have to work on stimulus to elevate buildings, protect subways, at least bury the power lines so the telephone poles don't keep falling over, lines getting snapped by trees in these hurricanes. Winterizing buildings that are wasting fuel. Europe is way ahead of us. They're doing it whether there's a profit motive in it or not because they know the stakes and it just needs to get done. And the Scrooges and the Simpsons and Bullheads will all say, oh, we can't afford to winterize all those buildings. Let's just privatize. We can't afford to build high-speed trains to get all the cars off the road. Wrong. We can't afford not to winterize. We can't afford not to get a high-speed rail system all over this country. We can't afford not to communicate that climate collapse and our failure to act is the #1 national security issue in this country and in this world. Iran did not wipe out the Jersey Shore. Staten Island hit with full-blown Katrina-side that was not caused by Al-Qaeda. World weather gone postal is here to stay, folks. And in an age when we've been programmed that government is automatically bad, Sandy is the perfect opportunity to show that publicly accountable government works. Who you want to depend on? A car crash by the side of the road. Who do you want to depend on if you hear somebody being beaten half to death next door or raped? Do you call Wackenhut? Do you call Burger King? No, you call the cops. You call the government. Just ask Chris Christie. Privatization is poison. Again, this is a national security issue, the national security issue. According to Senator Bernie Sanders, the country we're also jealous and afraid of, China, spends 9% of the gross domestic product on improving their infrastructure. Europe, average of 5%. America, less than half that, 2%, as opposed to well over 50% for the military. There's your stimulus right there. And for crying out loud, this time, hand Congress a finished bill, not just saying, oh yeah, let's fix health care. You write me a law and I'll sign it. And then the lobbyists had a feeding frenzy and we got this scam for insurance companies we've got today. Reintroduce your jobs bill and dare Congress to vote it down now. Not next year, this year. Dare them to vote down a ban on what the corporate media is already calling dark money. The secret money that is warping political campaigns and making a mockery of democracy. Do it now. All as part of the HCA program. Hold clowns accountable. One battery dead, we got to finish somehow. Here we go. Hold clowns accountable. Then full speed ahead into 2014, targeting every vulnerable clown office holder, blocking the change we need right now. Call the racists a racist. Continue to expose people waging a war on women and see how much longer they last. Occupy the voting booth. Occupy the streets. Target corporate predators by not giving them your money. As World War III, Earth versus corporations, goes on, we're not exactly winning. Not yet anyway. Because Karl Rove, the Koch brothers, Boehner, McConnell, Goldman Sachs, Monsanto, you name it, are already hard at work plotting their next moves to wipe out everything left that we hold dear, that makes life worth living, all for the sheer psychotic joy of it. They don't rest. Can we?